Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week's Race C is Group 1 at Le Mans, but since it's at Le Mans, only Group C really matters. Let's get into it. The anti-meta car of the week is the Nissan 962 CP. While the Sauber seems to be faster in time trial conditions, the 787B is absolutely dominant in race conditions. The Sauber is still fast, but the Nissan and the Mazda will blow straight past it in slipstream. The Mazda is so incredibly dominant though, the Nissan is the anti-meta by default simply by being second best. I managed to put this car in 20th position globally, the second fastest R92, but the game glitched out and I couldn't save the replay. It took me a little bit longer, but I got a 317.393, a little bit slower than the best time that I set. As you can see, there's one faster than me, and there are a few more in the top 100, but it's mostly dominated by the Sauber and the 787B. So first off, exit in third gear coming out of the chicane for the best possible momentum going into the start of your lap. In order to steer as little as possible going into T1, we want to be as wide as you can, and as long as you keep 2 tires away from that white line, you should be fine. What we're looking for right here is where the track starts to straighten out, where the curb straightens out after this little curve right here. Come off the curb to brake, but brake exactly right when it starts straightening out. You want to be turning in and dipping to first gear by the time you get to this total sign that's hanging on the right. The curb itself is the track limit, so put your right tires as far to the left on the curb as you possibly can, shifting up to third gear as you apex. Gently adding throttle, we're going to lift a little bit as we turn in, trying to use as much of this right-hand curb as we can, just like the last one, and then as you exit, try to keep your tires touching that curb and you should be gold. Using the curb on the left, we're going to start turning in at the very end of that, staying full throttle, trying to get as close to these little cone markers as we possibly can. Line up with the right side of the track, and as soon as you get past these little cone markers, you're going to hit the brakes. Immediately getting down to second gear, you're going to start trail braking in very soon, and you want to be off the brakes as you come all the way up onto this curb right here. In third gear, gently apply the throttle, and then lift as you turn in, trying to get as close to that green bollard as you possibly can. If you're too early or too heavy on the throttle, it's really easy to go in the grass here on the left, and if you do, your lap's pretty much going to be over. Right about at the beginning of the blue here on the right, that's when you want to hit the brakes, immediately trail brake in, and keep good light pressure on the brake until you're certain that you're as close to the apex as you can before getting on that throttle. It's really easy to carry too much speed there, and if you do scrub off too much, it's a lot better than, of course, just invalidating your lap. Jumping ahead to the chicane, we're going to look for the fence on the left, and when we get past the 200-meter sign, we're going to look for these marshals, and that is where we're going to hit the brakes. You need to brake heavily and downshift early to make sure that you're using all of that compression braking to get the car slowed down enough. You want to put the left tires on the curb here if you can, downshift to first once you get past the first set, then back all the way up to third using as much of the curb as you can. You can actually use a lot more than that, and of course be just gentle enough on the throttle that you do not slide out. As long as your car is pointed straight at the beginning of that curb, you shouldn't get a penalty, but if you go beyond that, you probably will. To save ourselves some time, we're going to jump ahead to the next chicane one more time. When we look for the meter boards, we're actually going to look for the 100 meter board, but when we get past these trees right before it, that's when I want you to brake. Just like before, downshift early to make sure that you're really using that compression braking and put your right tires on this curb if you possibly can. We're going to downshift to first really early to get it to rotate, stick as close to this curb as you can, and just like before, you need to get up to third gear before you exit. This exit curb is a little bit more sensitive, so make sure you're staying well to the right until just about when you hit it, then you can straight line it all the way to the edge of the asphalt here on the right. Once again, jumping forward to save ourselves some time, right after the 200 meter board, before the 100 meter board is when we're going to turn in and we're going to look for the end of this white line, and that is when you're going to hit the brakes. Aim for deep past that first little bend. We're going to brake heavily, downshift early, and you're going to make sure that you don't go outside of the white lines, but you want to get as close as you can, so when you turn in, you're carrying a lot of speed. In second gear, we want to make sure that we're on the throttle as soon as we get over that apex, being very gentle as we go over this curb, and of course, because you're going so slow, it's really easy to slide those tires. You want to avoid that at all costs. And for one final jump forward, we're going to go directly to our next braking zone. As this corner starts to curve in, we're going to turn in before hitting the brakes, and as you get to the middle of this curb, that's when you want to hit the brakes. Gently continue to steer yourself all the way to the right side of the track as you decelerate, and you want to start turning in very early for this left-hander, continuing to bleed off speed. It's very easy to slide out and go really wide or entirely off the track after this left-hander if you haven't scrubbed off enough speed, so make sure you're really braking heavily and trail braking all the way to the apex. As always in second gear, be very gentle on the throttle. You do want to get up to third gear just briefly, and right before this sign here on the left is when you're going to hit the brakes. You're going to immediately downshift to first gear and continue bleeding off speed. Once you get all the way on this curb, you're going to start turning in, trying to avoid the high part of this curb here. We want to make sure that you're in second gear and you do not want to spin the tires. Keep those tires cool, keep those tires grippy. If you slide out here, you're going to hit that wall or you're just going to lose a lot of time, so do not slide those tires. I see a lot of people going wide to hit this like it's a corner. Really, the road's just kind of bending. You can just hug the left and then set yourself up for the Porsche curves right here. Right at this blue sign, we're going to hit the brakes, immediately downshift to fourth, then third, and try to get off those brakes as soon as you possibly can. What you want to do is hit this inside apex really early, get up to fourth gear, and then get on that throttle as early as you possibly can. From here, continue steering to the right, and as you turn in here, you're going to lift off just briefly, but then get back on that throttle, aiming to get as close to this outside wall as you can without hitting it. Of course, forcing yourself there with the amount of throttle that you're using, not just trying to steer yourself there. Turn in before the end of the blue wall, and as you go over the curb, lift off the throttle, then get back on it, continue steering to the left, and then lift off, adding gentle brakes, staying in third gear. You're going to probably double apex this. You want to make sure that you're back close to the right by the time you get to the red signs, and before this sign right here, we want to turn and then lift, but I made a big mistake here. You'll notice I changed directions and lift off the throttle right about when I get to this red sign, but what I should have done is change directions before I got there, then lift after the weight had shifted. If you do both, it seems to overload the front tires and you get a lot of understeer, which you're going to see right here. I had to stay off that throttle for a very long time. In reality, I should have been on that throttle as soon as I got to that left curb. Judging by the ghost that was chasing me, I would estimate that I lost 2 to maybe even 3 tenths there. For this final section, we're going to look for the beginning of the pit entrance. We're going to put ourselves all the way in it, actually, and right before those 2 white lines in the distance converge, you're going to hit the brakes, just barely going over this curb here in the middle. Downshift quickly, you should be in second gear by the time you hit this first curb, and you should be able to just float over both of them. If you get up to third gear earlier, you should actually carry more speed, unlike what I did. I waited too long. Then you're going to be right about in the middle of the track right here. A quick downshift to first gear should slow you down just enough and allow you to have enough bite in the front tires from getting off the brakes early enough. Get back up to second gear, going over that curb, but of course try not to bounce off into the dirt. And when you get on the throttle, don't do what I did and just floor it, because that cost me probably another half tenth or so. Be gentle on that throttle in second gear for the end. Like I mentioned in the breakdown, when you're trying to get a really good start for your lap, you want to be in third gear coming out of that chicane, but I do think it's faster for the end of a lap to be in second gear there. This first left-right hand combination can be done with a little bit of oversteer, but it's super tricky and it's really easy just to slide off the track. So of course, it's better not to do that, but I've been about 1/10 and a half faster through here by sliding just a little bit, just as something if you want to try it. A lot of people overcook these corners. It's much more important to be really, really careful and hit the apexes, being able to get on the throttle really early coming out of the corners, than it is to carry more speed through there. Like I said before, I've had a 0.4 there. A 0.3 is probably possible as well. In fact, I'm certain a 0.3 is possible with this car. Just the first sector is really tricky. When you're going through the straights right here, make sure that you are winding the car out almost to the rev limiter. I think I hit 150 and then 194 before I shift from fourth and fifth gear. You gotta really spam the gears down really quickly. Use a lot of that compression braking, the kind of stuff that would actually break the car in real life. This is one of those times in Gran Turismo where you really need to do it to maximize your lap time. It's also really easy to kind of get lost when you're on these straights, especially if you're not used to this track, because it just looks like a whole bunch of trees. So make sure that you're picking out little things that you can see to give you clues as to where you are until you're really, really confident about when to brake. Once again, you want to really abuse the curbs, and you've got to be really early on the downshifts. This exit here, that's about as close as you can get to the edge of the track before you hit that exit curbing without getting a penalty. It's probably better just to not even get that close. I was kind of playing it dangerous and it paid off, but a lot of times it's going to give you a penalty even if you are just about where I was. In my lap that was a 17.147, I accidentally exited in third gear here, so it's kind of good that I didn't get to save that one. I think I cost myself 3 or 4 tenths though. It was really crazy. I could definitely get a mid 16 if I had a little bit more time with this. Like with most high-speed sections, you don't really need to set up for these corners. I know I'm kind of to the left here, but that's actually probably wasting time. Just hug all of those little kinks. Do not be afraid to use Gran Turismo's magic ABS. As you can see, I'm just jamming on the brakes and continuing to steer. There is a limit to how much you can steer while fully on the brakes, but you can do it a lot more than you would be able to in real life. You've got to be really brave on the braking portion right before this right-hander, because if you brake too early, it's really easy to lose a lot of time for whatever reason. And when you get on the throttle, of course, you can slide out really easily too. It's not worth short shifting to third gear because it's too slow, and second gear is scary, so you just have to really work on your throttle control. These Porsche curves are really about rhythm, so I would suggest watching this a lot so you can know exactly when I turn in, when you should turn in for this left-hander, etc. You can do a lot of this better, but if you're new to this, try to just copy the rhythm of what I'm doing. And of course, like I said before, turn in early, lift off the throttle after turning in to make sure you're not overloading the tires, which I think is what's happening. Positioning yourself really far to the right means that you can carry just a tiny bit more speed over these curbs. I didn't really utilize it because I stayed in second gear. If you can get the car in the right angle, you can shift back up to third gear to carry more momentum, and then you should be able to set yourself up for a much better exit than that as well. Before we get started on the strategy and talking about the various things that you need to think about with the race, I want to mention that because of this car class, you're probably going to find that it's possible that you're not quite as fast as you would be with Group 3 or Group 4, and you might also find that a lot of the people you usually race against are not either. The reason this is important is because with these cars there is a bit of a skill difference when it comes to just handling around a track, and with this track, which is long and complex and is so loved by some that there are some people who have an incredible knowledge of this track, while some people don't know it whatsoever, well, essentially, it's a recipe for disaster. There has been more dirty and clumsy driving today, or I should say, so far that I've seen this week, it's only been a couple days, than I've seen in a very long time. So be very careful, and you're going to need to be very patient with people. I'm saying this because I lost my patience a lot earlier when I was doing this race, so I actually haven't reviewed this race, and I don't remember if maybe it was a clean race or not. So I guess we're going to find out together. Once again, this is the type of race where a pit stop is required, but changing your tires is not. However, it gets kind of iffy. Now, when you go completely red in the tires, this car isn't actually that scary. It's not as scary as you might imagine, but I did reach full red a few times for various reasons. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I'm only saying this because I do encourage you to take tires if you don't think you can make it, or if you're not comfortable driving a car with really bad tires. If you've spent some time practicing it, or if you are comfortable, or if you just have good tire wear with your driving technique, then I would suggest just trying to pit as early as you can if you start from the back, or as late as you can if you start from the front, but there are a few other things to consider. Firstly, it's very easy to burn the tires both on braking and accelerating, mostly accelerating, and if you find yourself sliding out a lot, you're probably going to end up with really slow tires at the end of the race. A much larger concern, however, is taking damage, because when you take damage, your tire wear goes up significantly, a massive amount. You've got to do whatever you can to avoid damage, even though it is light damage and it will heal. It's going to have a lasting effect on your tires, which is really the worst part about it. If you watch my guides a lot, then you are very familiar with my thoughts on the strategy for races where you have to take a pit and you don't have to take tires or fuel. It's all about trying to do it alone so you can have as much clean air as you possibly can. Now, since these cars are ridiculously fast and there are a lot of straights, if people can stay within even 1.2 seconds of you, there's a chance they can stick with you the entire time. So you're going to have to be much, much faster than people to get away from them. This is where the hardest part about strategy can come into play. Social engineering. I don't really mean social engineering. I don't think that you should actually necessarily use people, but building good relationships with people on track can really, really benefit you. Because if you have even one person who's willing to work with you, either in front or behind, bump drafting down these straights can be insanely powerful. You can go entire seconds faster with a coordinated effort with a friend. You can also just pretend to be a friend, choose someone who's as fast as you, maybe a little bit faster, maybe a little bit slower, and then bump them down the entire time, try to follow them into the pits, and then at the end, you can make your move. You gotta be tricky with that one though. If you are just by yourself, which is totally fine, which most people are, then of course, like I said, you've just got to be tricky. The 787B is going to be able to pass you in almost all of the straights when you use this car, but you'll also be able to pass them, unlike with the Sauber, which is unfortunately not very fast at all. As you can see, I put on a very heavy defense against that 787B going into the Porsche curves, and that's because when you are behind someone, you're going to have dirty air, and if you have dirty air during the Porsche curves, not only are you going to be much slower, but you're going to be tearing up your tires. Dirty air also really ruins your tire life. Now, with the way this race has been going and my relative pace compared to other people, I was able to get really quickly up to the middle of the pack. But with so many people in front who may or may not be close to my pace, I decided, since there was pretty much no one else going in front of me, that I should go into the pits immediately. I didn't plan on taking tires, and I didn't really need it. Like I said, when the tires go completely red, when they're fully worn, they're still actually usable. So I figured I would just get as much clean air as I possibly could and hope that the people behind didn't suddenly gain a lot of pace, so they weren't going to bother me and try to pass me on any of the straights. Because the early pit stop was so effective, I didn't actually see anyone else until lap 4, and who do we come across? Our friend Y is Game. Y is Game is always a good driver. They're very clean, but as they said at the beginning of the race, they said, pass me, I'm slow. So, of course, I really didn't have to worry about it. They're always very kind, and if someone says pass you because they're slow, then you can expect, of course, they're just going to give you that position. And so, thank you, Y is Game. You made it very easy. Once again, to showcase the efficacy of this strategy, we do not run into anyone else except the race leader, and that is not until about halfway through the final lap. Now, I didn't show a lot of this car actually going up against the meta car, and what I like to do is show what these cars can do against the meta, but in reality it can pretty much just do exactly what the meta car can do. It's not quite as fast in a straight line, it doesn't have the same grip coming out of corners, but like I said, it's second best. If you can get a good run and stay in the slipstream of a 787B, you can pass it in braking, and you can handle just as well as it as long as you put the time in and practice with it. As you can see, I obviously have the fastest lap. This car is actually capable of 318s, not just 319s. You can go much faster, but I just wasn't really going that fast because I guess I didn't need to, and it was the end of the day. But anyways, I digress. In order to get fast with these combos is just practicing, and it's putting the time in. In reality, the best anti-meta is just practicing and being as smart as you possibly can, and that comes down to a better strategy. I just got really lucky there with Eves going off into the dirt. That is something we did discuss in the breakdown. It's really easy to go off in the dirt there, so as long as you're really careful and you put in the practice, you can make any of these anti-meta cars work. It doesn't mean you can make any car work, but a car that's close to as good as the best car is going to work just as well as the best car when it's in the right hands. And so, reality, I just hope I prepare you guys for these races with these guides. I'm kind of repeating myself a lot because it is crazy how little we actually had to fight for this, but it's not that we didn't earn it. We just had to spend the right amount of time getting fast in the combination. We had to get pretty lucky, and we had to employ the correct strategy, and all of that came together. So a lot of anti-meta cars have like one quirk that makes them better than the meta car, like it can brake deeper, or it has a higher top speed, or much better handling, or better tire wear, fuel usage, whatnot. This car is just a little bit worse than the meta car, so it's all about how you prepare and the strategy that you use. As always, thank you very much for watching my videos. If you like what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'd like to apologize for not uploading one of these guides last week. My entire stream room decided it did not want to work at all anymore, so I'm going to leave you with another thank you and a look at all of my current members. Thank you guys very much. You are the reason that I'm able to continue doing this. Nudge, say thank you. Maybe not.